He is called a genius, a ghost, the only person in history who hijacked a commercial airliner and disappeared without a trace. The legend of D.B. Cooper says he was a super agent, a former paratrooper who thought everything through to the smallest detail. It's an image that has stirred people's minds for decades, turning a criminal into a folk hero, a symbol of daring and freedom. But what if this 50-year-old legend is just a beautiful facade hiding a tragic reality? What if the key to solving America's greatest mystery lies in one almost imperceptible fatal mistake, in the evidence he left right on his seat? Today, we won't be retelling myths. We'll arm ourselves with facts, declassified FBI reports, and modern scientific analysis to examine this case under a microscope. We will reconstruct this daring act, examine every mistake this man made, study the evidence he left behind, and in the end, you will learn who he really was and why his chances of a successful outcome were practically zero. But to understand his failure, we must first understand why everyone considered him a genius. Let's go back to that very plane, November 24th, 1971. An era when air travel still held an air of romance and adventure. Northwest Orient Airlines Flight 305 was preparing for a short, half-hour flight from Portland to Seattle. On board, the atmosphere was calm and ordinary. None of the 36 passengers and 6 crew members had any idea that this flight would go down in history. Among them was an unremarkable middle-aged man in a business suit who called himself Dan Cooper. He took seat 18E at the rear of the plane, ordered a bourbon and soda, and lit a cigarette. As soon as the plane reached cruising altitude, he called over a flight attendant, Florence Schaffner. With a polite, almost shy smile, he handed her a note. 23-year-old Florence, accustomed to attention from male passengers, decided it was another attempt at flirtation and, without reading it, put the note in her pocket. Noticing this, Cooper leaned over and said quietly but firmly, "Miss, I think you should read this note. It contains a serious threat." What went through the young woman's mind at that moment? Shock? Disbelief? She opened the note. In neat handwriting it read, "I have a dangerous device in my briefcase. I want you to sit next to me obeying." She sat down. Cooper calmly opened his briefcase. Inside, she saw 8 red cylinders, a bundle of wires, and a large battery. There was no doubt left. The threat was very real. And this is where this man begins to build his legend. His demands, relayed to the pilots via the flight attendant, were frighteningly specific and professional. Exactly $200,000 in cash, exclusively in unmarked $20 bills. 4 parachutes, not 2 but 4, to confuse the police and create the appearance that he could take a hostage. And a fuel tanker ready to go upon arrival in Seattle. Not a single unnecessary detail. No panic. At that moment, the fate of everyone on board depended on one man, Airline President Donald Nearup.
Yes.
And he made a decision that was not obvious, but, as time would tell, the only right one. To pay, no negotiations, no assault. He understood that in an era when air travel was becoming widespread, news of a tragedy on board would deal a devastating blow to the company's reputation, which would cost it more than any amount of money. While the FBI in Seattle was frantically gathering money, calling banks, and looking for suitable parachutes at the local airbase, the pilots were ordered to circle in the air. The short half-hour flight turned into an agonizing 3-hour wait. Passengers were told about a minor technical malfunction. At 5:46 p.m., already at dusk, the plane finally landed in Seattle. It was driven to a remote, dimly lit parking lot, away from prying eyes. A single airline employee approached the plane and handed over a duffel bag containing money and parachutes. Having received what he had requested, Cooper kept his word. He released all the passengers and 2 flight attendants. Only he, the pilots, the flight engineer, and flight attendant Tina McClough, who had volunteered to be a liaison, remained on board. The plane was refueled and took off again, but a real shock awaited the pilots ahead. Cooper began to dictate flight parameters with the precision of a flight engineer. Speed not exceeding 320 kilometers per hour, altitude 3,000 meters, landing gear down, flaps at 15 degrees. How could a simple passenger know that only in this mode could the rear ramp of a Boeing 727 be safely opened without risking destruction of the aircraft? It was this question that turned him from an ordinary extortionist into a super agent in the eyes of the FBI. But as soon as the plane was in the night sky, the mask of the professional began to crack, and an amateur appeared, making one fatal mistake after another. Mistake number 1, jumping into the unknown. Let's paint a picture. Nighttime, pitch darkness, intensified by thick clouds, freezing rain. The temperature outside is minus 20 degrees Celsius, but with the wind chill, it feels like minus 50. Below, the raging ocean of wild forests, mountains, and canyons of the northwestern United States. This isn't just risky, it's a suicidal choice. No professional, no military paratrooper in their right mind would do this without extreme necessity. Mistake number 2, equipment. His protection against this raging element? A thin business suit, a starched shirt, and light moccasins. No thermal underwear, no protective helmet, no special footwear. He was dressed for the office, not for battle with nature. Even if he had survived the jump itself, inevitable hypothermia would have set in within minutes. Finally, mistake number 3, the most significant and revealing one, the choice of parachute. He was given 4 parachutes, 2 modern sports parachutes with a controllable canopy, and 2 old military parachutes that were practically uncontrollable oaks. But there was one more detail that Cooper didn't know about. One of the spare parachutes was a training parachute, sewn up for demonstrations on the ground and completely useless for jumping. Anyone who had ever dealt with parachutes would have checked the equipment. They would have inspected the slings, checked the ring, and made sure everything was in working order. Cooper did not do this. He did not ask a single question, and by pure luck, he did not choose the sewn-up model. But by fatal misfortune, he grabbed one of the old, uncontrollable military parachutes, leaving the brand new sports parachute on the seat, with which he could at least somehow control his descent. Imagine it's like choosing a rotary dial phone over a modern smartphone to accomplish a difficult task. This choice virtually guaranteed a tragic outcome. But even if he had chosen the right parachute, there was another hidden trap waiting for him, one he didn't even suspect. We'll reveal it a little later. At approximately 8:13 p.m., somewhere between Seattle and Reno, D.B. Cooper ordered the flight attendant to go to the cockpit. Then he stepped alone into the black, icy abyss. He disappeared. One of the largest and most expensive investigations in FBI history began. Hundreds of agents, soldiers, and volunteers combed through the woods. But years passed, and the case remained at a standstill until 9 years later, in 1980, a miracle happened. 8-year-old Brian Ingram, playing on the sandy banks of the Columbia River in Tina Bar, found 3 decayed bundles of $20 bills, a total of $5,800. The serial numbers matched. On the one hand, this discovery gave hope. It confirmed the approximate landing area. But on the other hand, it was another blow to the myth of genius. He most likely lost the money immediately after the jump. But let's go back to the plane. Cooper left his tie there. For decades, it lay in the FBI archives as one of the few pieces of evidence. But in 2009, with the advent of new technologies, a group of independent researchers examined it under an electron microscope. and what they found changed everything. Microscopic particles of pure titanium, aluminum, and a rare alloy of titanium and antimony were found on the fabric of the tie. In 1971, such exotic materials were not found in everyday life. They were used in a very narrow, high-tech field, aerospace industry. For example, at Boeing's factories in Seattle, as well as at their contractors involved in chemical etching of metals. But at that very time, the region's aviation industry was undergoing massive layoffs. The picture is becoming clearer. We are not dealing with a CIA agent or a super soldier. Most likely, it was an engineer, technician, or skilled worker from an aviation company in the Seattle area. Someone who knew the aircraft's design from the inside out, but was a complete amateur when it came to parachuting and survival. A man driven to despair by job loss or debt. So who was he? Armed with this new profile, the FBI revisited its list of more than 800 suspects. Among them were some colorful characters, for example, Richard McCoy, a veteran who committed an almost identical incident 5 months later. He seemed like the perfect candidate, but he had an ironclad alibi. Or Robert Rackshaw, a former paratrooper with a turbulent past who had enjoyed decades of fame, hinting at his involvement. But against him, as against the others, there was not a single piece of real evidence. They were all just ghosts, shadows of the real legend. The FBI weeded them out one by one because while everyone was looking for a person, the answer lay all along in the evidence, in that very mistake we mentioned earlier. So what do we have? The answer to D.B. Cooper's mystery is that there may not have been a mystery at all. There was no brilliant plan. There was a desperate act by a disgruntled employee who made a series of fatal mistakes. Remember that hidden trap I mentioned? Money. $200,000 in $20 bills weighs almost 10 kilograms. Trying to hold on to that heavy, awkward, windswept bag while jumping into a hurricane-force storm most likely led to instant loss of control, disorientation, and loss of the money itself. By all laws of physics and logic, D.B. Cooper ended his journey that same night, crashing or freezing in the icy water. His legend was born only because his remains were never found in the vast, wild forests of Washington state. The FBI officially closed the case in 2016, acknowledging that the resources spent on the search would be better directed toward solving current cases. But one intriguing question remains. History knows of at least 5 Cooper imitators who jumped under similar conditions, and all of them survived to be caught. Could it be that this amateur, contrary to all logic, was phenomenally lucky? What do you think? Did his jump end tragically that same night? Or did he manage to get away with the money and live to a ripe old age, laughing at us all? Write your theory in the comments. If you like these kinds of investigations, where we separate fact from fiction, subscribe to our channel. Thanks for watching.